Walter Blake sat hunched over the old wooden bench. The steady tap of a shoe tip echoed through the quiet room. The door swung open, bell chiming. A red-cheeked boy stepped in, clutching a sneaker with the toe blown out. He hesitated, then mumbled, "Sir, do you fix shoes on credit?" Blake looked up, startled. He studied the boy for a long beat, said nothing, slid a wooden chair forward, and gave a small nod. He wouldn't know if he'd chosen right, until 3 days later, when the boy brought him the answer. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. And subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The February wind cut through Cleveland's east side like a blade. Walter Blake stood at the window of Blake & Son's shoe repair, watching snow settle on Lexington Avenue. 73 years old, and the street barely recognized him anymore. Where Mrs. Kowalski's bakery once perfumed the block, a minimalist coffee shop now served $12 lattes. The hardware store where his father bought their first tools, a yoga studio with frosted glass. But it was the shop across the street that made Walter's jaw tighten every morning. Whitman Footwear Boutique blazed with LED lights, chrome fixtures and white walls, displaying $200 sneakers like museum pieces. Marcus Whitman, 45 and sharp-dressed, was rearranging his window display with intensity. Whitman glanced up, caught Walter watching, and smirked. He held up his phone, mouthing, "Your time's up, old man." Then he gestured at his gleaming boutique versus Walter's dim shop, new versus old, success versus failure. Walter looked away first, hated that he always did. Inside Blake & Sons, time had stopped around 1987. The wooden counter bore decades of scratches, coffee rings, one deep gouge from when Daniel knocked over a hammer at age 6. Walter's fingers found that scar every morning, like a prayer. The tax notice sat folded beside his register. $8,400, due in 45 days. Final notice in red ink. The bell chimed. Margaret Doyle swept in with the force of a retired middle school teacher. 72, fierce, wearing an outdated cardigan. "Walter Blake, you look terrible." She set a thermos on his counter. "Soup, homemade, don't argue." "Margaret, when's the last time you ate real food?" Walter didn't answer, returning to Mrs. Henderson's shoe on his workbench. 23 years fixing her shoes, he knew her walk better than she did. "Heard about the taxes," Margaret said softly. His hand paused. "News travels. You need to consider your options. Selling those apartments by the lake. No." He set down his knife. "This shop is all I have left of him, Margaret." His gaze found the shelf behind the counter. Daniel's photograph, 22 in his army dress uniform, that crooked smile. Beside it, combat boots polished to mirrors, laces tied in the double knot Walter had taught him. "Daniel wouldn't want you drowning in debt," Margaret said gently. "Daniel's not here to tell me what he wants." The words came sharp. He softened. "If I close this shop, who am I?" Margaret squeezed his hand. "You're Walter Blake, my friend, that doesn't change." After she left, silence pressed in. Walter worked another hour, skiving, cementing, hammering nails with precision born from 53 years. The doorbell rang again. Excuse me, sir." The voice was young, hesitant. Walter set down the Oxford and looked up. A boy stood just inside the doorway, maybe 14 or 15, skinny as a rail in an oversized jacket that had seen too many winters. He clutched something against his chest, a pair of sneakers, Walter noted, even from across the room. The boy's dark eyes darted around the shop before settling back on Walter, equal parts hope and fear swimming in them. "We're about to close, son," Walter said, though his voice wasn't unkind. He glanced at the clock, 5:47 p.m. "But come on in, what can I do for you?" The boy stepped forward, and Walter could see him better now. African American, thin face, nervous energy radiating off him like heat. He approached the counter, and carefully laid the sneakers down. They were running shoes, or had been. The mesh upper was intact, but the right toe had separated completely from the sole, flapping open like a broken promise. The laces were mismatched, one brown, one black. The left shoe had a crack running along the rubber sole. "Can you?" The boy started, then swallowed hard. "Can you fix these?" Walter picked up the right shoe, turning it over in his hands. The sole had good tread left, the boy hadn't worn through it. The separation was clean, easily repaired. The crack in the other sole would need some work, but nothing impossible. I can fix them, Walter said. He looked up at the boy. When do you need them? I have a race, track meet, Saturday morning. The words tumbled out fast. I know it's short notice. I know Saturday's 4 days away. That's plenty of time. Walter set the shoe down and reached for his order pad. Name? Jamal Porter. Walter wrote it down, then did a quick mental calculation of materials and time. That'll be $18. You can pick them up Friday afternoon. Jamal's face fell. His hand went to his jacket pocket, fingers worrying at something inside. The thing is, his voice dropped to barely a whisper. I don't have it right now. The $18, I was hoping could I maybe pay you after the race. There's prize money if I place, and I know I can place if I just have proper shoes. And he was talking faster now, words tripping over each other, and Walter could see the desperation creeping in around the edges. The boy's hand was still in his pocket, and Walter would bet his last dollar there were maybe 3 or 4 crumpled bills in there if that. I'm real good, sir. Coach Reynolds says I got potential, says I could maybe get a scholarship if I keep at it. But I can't run in these, he gestured at the broken sneakers, and I can't afford new ones. My mom, she works 2 jobs, and we're barely making it, you know. But if I could just get these fixed, just for Saturday, I swear I'll come back with the money. I swear on everything. Hey, Walter held up a hand, and Jamal fell silent. The boy's chest was rising and falling rapidly, his eyes shining with something that looked dangerously close to tears. Walter looked at the sneakers again, looked at the boy. In his mind, unbidden, came the memory of his own son Michael, 15 years old, standing in this exact spot, asking for money for track spikes. That had been 28 years ago, and Walter had said yes without hesitation. Michael had never gotten to use those spikes. Leukemia didn't care about track meets. What's your event? Walter asked quietly. Jamal blinked, caught off guard by the question. 400 meters, sometimes the 800. You any good? A flicker of pride crossed the boy's face. Yes, sir. I'm real good. Walter nodded slowly. He looked at the shoes again, then at his hands, weathered, age-spotted, but still steady, still capable of this small thing. Tell you what, he said. I'll fix them, but I won't charge you. Jamal's eyes went wide. Sir? No charge. Walter pulled the sneakers toward him. But I'm going to do it right. Not just glue the sole back on. I'm going to reinforce it, fix that crack, replace those laces with proper running laces, and I'm going to show you how to take care of them so they last. I don't, Jamal's voice cracked. Why would you do that? Why indeed? Walter couldn't quite articulate it himself. Maybe it was the way the boy stood there, pride and desperation warring on his young face. Maybe it was the ghost of his son that never quite left this shop. Maybe after years of just going through the motions, wake, work, eat, sleep, repeat, maybe he was tired of feeling nothing. Because you asked, Walter said simply, and because those shoes look like they've got a race left in them. Be ashamed to let them quit before you do. For a long moment, Jamal just stared at him. Then so quietly Walter almost didn't hear it. Thank you. Come back tomorrow after school. I'll have them ready for you to try on, make sure the fit's right, and I'll show you how to lace them properly for racing. Deal? Deal? Jamal's whole face had transformed, lit up like someone had switched on a light inside him. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means. Go on home before it gets dark, Walter said, though his own voice had gone a bit rough. I'll see you tomorrow. Jamal backed toward the door, nodding repeatedly. Tomorrow? Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. The bell chimed as he left, and Walter sat alone in the flickering light. He picked up the right sneaker again, studying the damage. In his mind, he was already working through the repair, how he'd use contact cement for the initial bond, then stitch it for durability. He'd replace the insoles too. They were flattened to nothing. And those laces, he had some good nylon ones in the back that would hold up to hard running. His hands moved almost of their own accord, reaching for his tools. As he worked, something shifted in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name. It felt suspiciously like purpose. Outside, the November wind kept blowing. Inside Blake and Sons, for the first time in months, maybe years. Walter Blake worked with something more than habit. The lights flickered overhead, but he didn't notice. He was too busy remembering what it felt like to matter. The Porter apartment sat on the third floor of a walk-up building that had seen better decades. The radiator clanked and hissed, fighting a losing battle against the November cold seeping through the single-pane windows. May Porter stood at the kitchenette counter, dividing a rotisserie chicken into portions that would need to stretch through Thursday, when her check from the hospital would clear. She was 41 but looked older on tired days, younger when she smiled. Tonight, standing in her pale blue scrubs, she'd come straight from her shift as a nursing assistant. She felt every one of her years plus a few extra. The apartment door burst open. Mom, you're not going to believe." Jamal stopped short, remembering his manners, remembering the neighbors below who complained about noise. He closed the door more carefully behind him, and crossed the small living room in 3 long strides. "Something good happened," May said, reading her son's face like she'd been doing for 15 years. "Tell me." The story poured out of him, the broken shoes, the desperation that had driven him to the old repair shop, the man with silver hair, who'd said yes when Jamal had been bracing for no. He said he'd fix them. No charge, no charge. "Mom?" Jamal's voice rose and fell with wonder. "And not just glue them. He's going to do it right, replace the laces and everything." He said. Jamal's throat worked. He said because I asked, and because the shoes still had a race in them. May's hands had stopped their work. She looked at her son, her baby, who wasn't a baby anymore, who was starting to shoot up taller than her, whose voice had dropped an octave this past year, and felt something crack open in her chest. In their world, people didn't do things for nothing. Every transaction had a cost. Every kindness came with strings attached. "Did you thank him?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am, about 100 times. But Mom," Jamal's face grew serious, "we have to do something. We can't just take charity." There it was, the pride she'd raised him with, the spine that would serve him well in life, but also the fear she recognized, inherited from her own mother. If you owe someone, they own a piece of you. May dried her hands on a dish towel, and moved to the small kitchen table, gesturing for Jamal to sit. He folded himself into the chair across from her, and she reached out to take his hands. "Listen to me," she said. "That man did a kind thing. A rare thing. The right way to honor that isn't to treat it like a debt, it's to treat it like a gift. But let me finish." Her voice was gentle but firm. "When someone does something good for you, you don't repay them, you pay it forward, and you acknowledge them. You let them know their kindness mattered." She stood and crossed to the small desk in the corner, where she kept their important papers, bills, Jamal's school records, her work schedule. From the bottom drawer, she pulled out a small white envelope. It was blank, meant for some future purpose. She brought it back to the table. "After your race Saturday," she said, "win or lose, though I know you're going to win." "Mom?" Jamal protested, but he was smiling. "Win or lose," she continued, "you go back to that shop, you thank him properly, you tell him how the race went, and," she paused, thinking, "you tell him what his kindness meant. Not with money, with words, real ones." Jamal nodded slowly. "And if I win, if there's prize money," May's lips curved, "then you offer it, not as payment for the shoes, as a way to say, your kindness helped me do something good, and I want you to have this because you made it possible. You see the difference? It's a gift back, not a debt paid." "Exactly." May squeezed his hands. "That man gave you something today, not just fixed shoes. He gave you faith that good people still exist. That's worth more than $18, baby. That's worth everything." They sat in silence for a moment, the radiator clanking its irregular rhythm, the smell of seasoned chicken filling their small space. "I'm going to win," Jamal said suddenly, fiercely. "I'm going to win, and I'm going to take every penny of that prize money back to him." Jamal, "Not as payment," he said quickly, "as proof that his kindness went somewhere, that it mattered." May's eyes stung. She blinked rapidly, smiled. "Then you better get to bed early this week. No staying up late on that phone." "Yes, ma'am." After dinner, after the dishes were done, and homework was finished, May watched Jamal take the broken sneakers from his backpack. He carried them carefully across the living room to the small closet they used for coats and shoes, but instead of setting them on the floor, he hung them by their laces on a hook high up on the inside of the door. the hook that had been Michael's, back when May's brother used to visit before his job transferred him to Atlanta. The sneakers dangled there, broken and hopeful all at once. Jamal reached up and touched them gently, like a talisman, like a promise. "I won't let you down," he whispered, and May wasn't sure if he was talking to the shoes, to the man who was fixing them, or to himself, maybe all three. That night, May lay in her own bed and thought about the shoe repairman she'd never met. Walter Blake. Jamal had told her the name painted on the shop window. In the morning, she'd call Meredith from her church, who knew everyone in the neighborhood, and ask about him. Not because she didn't trust him. If his kindness was real, as she believed it was, she wanted to know his story. She wanted to understand what kind of man gave without asking for return. Outside their window, Cleveland settled into its cold night. Inside, in a third-floor apartment that held more love than square footage, a mother held on to hope, and a son dreamed of running. The sneakers hung in the dark, waiting for transformation. Saturday morning broke cold and clear over Lincoln High School's track. The bleachers were half full, parents, students, a handful of scouts from smaller colleges holding clipboards and stopwatches. The air smelled of chalk dust from the lanes and competition. Jamal stood at the starting line for the 400-meter final, forcing his breathing to steady. The shoes felt perfect on his feet, better than perfect. When he'd picked them up Friday afternoon, Mr. Blake had walked him through everything: how the reinforced sole would give him better push-off, how to lace them to prevent slippage, how to break them in gradually. "These shoes know the way home," Mr. Blake had said, his weathered hands tying a final knot. "You just run your race." Now crouched in lane 4, Jamal felt the rubber track beneath his fingers and let everything else fall away. The starter raised the pistol. Bang! Jamal exploded from the blocks. The first 100 meters were controlled aggression, building speed without burning out. He could feel the shoes gripping, releasing, gripping, each step solid and sure. By the back stretch, he'd moved into third place. The boy in lane 6 had better form, longer stride, but Jamal had something else. He had hunger. He had shoes that had been saved. He had a man waiting to hear how this race went. Coming into the final turn, Jamal pulled even with second place. His lungs screamed, his legs burned, but the shoes held firm. 50 meters out, he found another gear he didn't know he had. 40 meters, 30. He crossed the line in first place by half a second. The time clock read 52.8 seconds. Not his personal best, but solid. More importantly, first place meant a $150 prize from the meet's sponsor, a local sporting goods chain, trying to build community goodwill. Coach Reynolds grabbed him in a bear hug, shouting something Jamal couldn't hear over the roaring in his ears. His teammates surrounded him, slapping his back, his shoulders. Through the chaos, Jamal's eyes found his mother in the bleachers. May stood with both hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. By mid-afternoon, after the awards ceremony, where they'd placed a medal around his neck and handed him an envelope with the prize money, Jamal and May stood outside Blake & Son's shoe repair. Something was wrong. The front window was intact, the open sign still hung in the door, but through the glass, Jamal could see scorch marks on the back wall. The smell of burnt wood and electrical fire hung in the air even outside. "Mom," Jamal said, his stomach dropping. They pushed inside. The bell chimed its familiar note, now somehow discordant in the changed space. The front of the shop looked mostly normal, the counter, the cubbies, the old photos on the wall, but the back corner, where the workbench and ancient sewing machine stood, was a disaster. The wall was black with soot, several ceiling tiles had collapsed, and the workbench itself was a charred ruin. The small storage room beyond, where Jamal had glimpsed boxes of supplies and leather hides, had clearly been gutted worse than what he could see. Walter Blake stood in the middle of it all, staring at the damage with a kind of numb acceptance. He wore the same leather apron, now streaked with ash. "Mr. Blake," Jamal's voice came out small. Walter turned, and for a moment, his face was blank, lost. Then recognition sparked, and something like a smile tried to form. "Jamal." His voice was rough with smoke or emotion, or both. "How'd you do? The race?" "I won." Jamal stepped forward, his medal still around his neck, suddenly feeling foolish for wearing it. "But what? What happened?" "Electrical fire. Last night, maybe 2 in the morning." Walter gestured vaguely at the destruction. Fire department got it contained before it spread to the front, thank God, but the back. He shook his head. Everything I use for repairs, the machine, the tools, most of my supplies, gone. May had moved closer, her nursing instincts kicking in as she examined Walter's face and hands for injury. Are you hurt? Did you breathe in too much smoke? I'm fine. I wasn't here when it happened. Neighbor called me, and by the time I got here, the firefighters had it under control. Walter rubbed a hand over his face. Insurance adjuster came this morning, says electrical fires can be tricky. Wants to investigate before they'll commit to covering repairs. Investigate? May's voice sharpened. What's to investigate? You said it was electrical. Old building, old wiring. They're worried I might have overloaded circuits, or done repairs myself instead of hiring a licensed electrician, which I didn't, but, he shrugged helplessly, they're going to take their time deciding. Meanwhile, I've got to get the back room cleaned out before the ash damage spreads, and I need an electrician to come certify everything's safe before I can even think about reopening. How much? Jamal asked suddenly. The electrician, how much does that cost? Walter looked at him, really looked, and seemed to see the metal for the first time. His expression softened. You won. Yes sir. Because of the shoes. Jamal reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, revealing the crisp bills inside. This is the prize money. $150. I want you to have it. Jamal. No, please. Jamal's voice cracked. You helped me when I had nothing. Let me help you. May stepped forward, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. Mr. Blake, my boy is right. You gave him a gift when he needed it most. This isn't payment for the shoes. This is a gift back. This is us saying, your kindness mattered, it went somewhere good, and now maybe it can come back around to help you. Walter stared at the money like it was something dangerous. His throat worked, and when he spoke, his voice was barely audible. I can't take a child's prize money. I'm not a child, Jamal said with quiet dignity. I'm someone who wants to help. The three of them stood in the ruined shop, November light slanting through the front window, illuminating the ash that still floated in the air like snow. Finally Walter reached out and took the envelope with trembling hands. The electrician quotes I got were between $200 and $300, he said quietly. This gets me halfway there, maybe more than halfway if I can find someone reasonable. He looked up at Jamal, and his eyes were red-rimmed. Thank you. Can we help? May asked, with the cleanup. Over the next 2 hours, the three of them worked together. May, with her nursing pragmatism, organized the salvageable tools from the destroyed ones. Jamal hauled damaged goods out to the alley dumpster, his young strength put to good use. Walter directed them, and slowly, so slowly, the scope of what could be saved became clearer. It was during one of his trips to the dumpster, his arms full of charred wood, that Jamal noticed it. The street corner across from the shop had a traffic camera mounted on its pole, but there was another camera too, one of those city surveillance cameras that had been installed in recent years. This one was positioned oddly, angled more toward the buildings than the street. It was partially obscured by the branches of an old maple tree, easy to miss unless you were looking. Jamal paused, studying it. From where he stood, he could see the camera's lens was pointed directly at Blake and Son's front entrance and part of the side alley. A strange feeling prickled up his spine. He glanced around, then pulled out his phone and took a photo of the camera, making sure to get the pole number visible at its base. CC 147A. You okay out there? Walter's voice called from inside. Yes sir, just catching my breath. Jamal looked at the camera one more time, then back at the shop. The fire had started in the back, Walter said. Electrical. But the shop was old. Wasn't the whole building old? Why would the wiring suddenly fail now? He filed the thought away, pocketing his phone. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was looking for conspiracy where there was only bad luck. But as he headed back inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that the camera might have seen something important. By evening, the back room was cleared enough to assess the real damage. The workbench could be salvaged with refinishing. The sewing machine was toast. Most of the specialized tools were gone, melted or warped beyond use. Walter had called an electrician who could come Monday morning, a retired union man, who said he'd do the inspection for $125, a favor for a fellow small business owner. "I'll reopen," Walter said as they stood surveying their work. "It'll take time, maybe a few weeks to get the supplies and equipment replaced, even if the insurance comes through. But I'll reopen, we'll help," May said firmly. "However you need us." As Jamal and his mother prepared to leave, Walter stopped them at the door. "That was some race you ran," he said to Jamal. "I wish I could have been there to see it." "Maybe you can come to the next one," Jamal replied. "State qualifiers are in 3 weeks." Walter nodded, something like a promise passing between them. Walking home through the darkening streets, May pulled Jamal close. "You did a good thing today. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does, but it's what we can do, so we do it." That night, Jamal lay in bed, his phone glowing in the dark. He pulled up the photo of the surveillance camera, stared at the poll number, CC. If there was any chance that camera had footage of the night of the fire, it would be stored somewhere in the city's system. He'd learned about it in civics class, public records, freedom of information requests, but those took time, and sometimes they got denied for ongoing investigations or security reasons. He needed to think about this carefully. If the fire really was just an accident, there was no point stirring up trouble, but if it wasn't, Jamal closed the photo and set his phone aside. First he'd wait and see. Mr. Blake was getting the shop inspected and cleaned up. Maybe the insurance would come through. Maybe everything would be fine. But the camera had seen something that night. Jamal was certain of it, and if it turned out Mr. Blake needed more than money to rebuild, if he needed the truth, then Jamal would find a way to get it. The sneakers sat by his bedside, worn from their victory lap but still solid, still ready. Jamal closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind kept circling back to that camera, watching silently from its perch, holding secrets in its digital memory. "Wait," he told himself, "watch, be ready." 3 days after the fire, Walter stood in front of the empty display cabinet near his shop's front window and saw his own reflection staring back at him. The cabinet had been his father's idea back in the 70s, a place to showcase restored shoes, the greatest hits of their craft. Over the years, it had held everything from Victorian button-up boots to Air Jordans, but it had sat empty for the last 5 years, ever since Michael died, and Walter had lost the will to curate, to celebrate, to remember that his work mattered beyond simple function. Now the glass reflected his face back at him, age spots, deep lines carved by grief, eyes that had forgotten how to see hope. Behind him, the shop's front was operational again. The electrician had given his blessing Monday morning. The fire hadn't compromised the building's main systems, just the overloaded circuit in the back workshop. With Jamal's prize money and some of Walter's emergency fund, he'd been able to hire a crew to repair the worst damage. The workbench was refinished. A new sewing machine, not as good as his old one, but functional, sat in the corner, ordered used from a supplier in Pittsburgh. But customers hadn't returned. Word of the fire had spread, and with it, rumors. He'd heard whispers at the hardware store. Maybe Blake was trying to collect insurance money. Maybe the shop was failing, and he got desperate. Never mind that he'd been operating at a modest profit for 40 years. Never mind his reputation. One fire, and suddenly people looked at him sideways. Worse were the comments from the boutique shoe shop across the street, Premium Footwear, owned by Richard Whitman. Walter had seen him standing on his own sidewalk yesterday, watching the police tape come down from Blake & Sons, a smug smile on his face. They'd been competitors for 15 years, ever since Whitman opened his high-end store selling designer shoes, at prices working people couldn't afford. Walter had never considered them true rivals. They served different clientele. But Whitman had always resented that Blake & Sons existed at all, a stubborn reminder that shoes could be fixed instead of replaced, that craftsmanship outlasted fashion. The door chimed. Jamal walked in, school backpack over one shoulder. "Hey Mr. Blake." "Afternoon Jamal." Walter turned from the empty cabinet. "No practice today, short day. I wanted to check on you." Jamal's eyes swept the shop. "It looks better, getting there." Walter gestured vaguely. Slowly, Jamal approached the cabinet, studying their dual reflection in the glass. What was this for? Display case. My father used to put special restorations in here, shoes with stories. Walter's voice carried the weight of memory. Haven't used it in years. Why not? The simple question hung in the air. Why not indeed? Because showcasing his work felt like vanity. Because nobody cared about an old man's craft. Because after Michael died, everything that used to bring joy felt like betrayal. Lost the habit, I guess. Walter said finally. Jamal set his backpack down and pulled something from inside, his medal from Saturday's race. The bronze gleamed dully in the shop's light. Put this in there, he said. Walter blinked. What?
Jamal, that's your medal. I know, and I want it here. The boy's voice was firm. Not sitting in my room where only me and my mom see it. Here, where people can know that what you do changes things, changes lives. Walter stared at the offered medal, his throat tight. Why? Because people are saying stuff. I've heard them. About the fire, about the shop maybe closing. Jamal's young face hardened with determination. They don't know you. They don't know what you did for me. So let's show them. One medal won't. It's a start. Jamal pressed the medal into Walter's reluctant hands. And maybe other people will add their stories too. Maybe you could invite them to. Make this a place that shows what you've saved. The idea settled into Walter's mind like a seed taking root. A display of the lives touched by his work, not just shoes but the stories they carried. The marathon runner who finished her first 26.2 in Walter's rebuilt Nikes. The little girl whose tap shoes he'd repaired 3 times because they were her mother's before cancer took her. The construction worker whose work boots lasted 15 years because Walter replaced the soles every 18 months like clockwork. Stories. Evidence that his craft mattered beyond simple transaction. I'd need to reach out to people, Walter said slowly. Ask if they'd be willing to do it. Jamal's eyes shone. Make this place what it really is, not just a shoe shop. A place where dreams get a second chance. Over the next week Walter made calls. Apologetic at first, then stronger as people responded with enthusiasm. The marathon runner sent her race bib and a photo of her crossing the finish line, feet bloody but spirit unbroken. The construction worker stopped by with his 16-year-old boots and a handwritten note about how Walter's work had literally kept him on his feet through his daughter's wedding, his wife's chemotherapy, his own battle back from a broken ankle. Each story, each artifact went into the cabinet with care. Walter hand-lettered small placards on cream cardstock. These tap shoes belonged to Martha Rodriguez's mother. We've kept them dancing for 3 years and counting. James Thompson ran the Cleveland Marathon in these Nikes, after we rebuilt them twice. Every step matters. Jamal Porter won the Lincoln High 400M in these sneakers. Sometimes all a dream needs is someone who believes in it. He placed Jamal's medal in the center, elevated on a small stand. At the top of the cabinet, in larger script he added a header, "The Corner of Dreams where every step matters." When he finished it was late Thursday evening. Walter stood back, studying his work through the storefront window from outside. The cabinet glowed under the shop lights, each story a small beacon. Friday morning, the first customer in weeks walked in. Mrs. Chen, who'd been bringing her family's shoes to Blake & Sons for 20 years. "Walter," she said, her voice warm with relief. "I heard about the fire. I'm so glad you're reopening." "Thank you, Lily." He accepted her daughter's school shoes, needed new soles. "Should have them ready by Wednesday. I saw your display." She nodded toward the cabinet. "It's beautiful, really beautiful." By noon 3 more regulars had stopped in. By evening people who hadn't been customers started coming, drawn by word of mouth, by curiosity about the cabinet they glimpsed through the window. Each visitor read the stories. Several took photos. 2 people asked if they could contribute their own items to the display. Jamal stopped by after practice, still in his track warm-ups. "It's working," he said simply, looking at the small crowd of people examining the cabinet. "It's a start," Walter agreed. But there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before, something that sounded like hope. Across the street, Richard Whitman stood in his boutique's doorway, arms crossed over his expensive suit. He watched the people entering Blake & Sons with a scowl that deepened each time the bell chimed. He watched and he waited, and he plotted. Because if there was one thing Richard Whitman couldn't stand, it was an old cobbler getting attention that should have been his.
The corner of dreams glowed in the November twilight. Inside, Walter helped a young mother choose between heel heights for her interview shoes, and for the first time in years, his hands moved with something beyond muscle memory. They moved with purpose. The first rumor started small, as these things do. A comment on the neighborhood Facebook group, ostensibly innocent. Heard Blake's fire might not have been accidental. Strange timing with his business struggling. Just saying. It was unsigned, posted from a profile with no photo. But the seed was planted. By the following Tuesday, Walter noticed it. Fewer customers than the previous week. The ones who did come in avoided eye contact, dropping off shoes with mumbled instructions before hurrying out. Standing behind his counter that afternoon, Walter felt the weight of suspicion settling over his shop like ash. The door chimed. Richard Whitman walked in. He was a tall man, lean in the way of someone who paid for a gym membership and used it. His salt and pepper hair was styled with product. His shoes gleamed with a shine Walter recognized as factory fresh leather. No character, no history, just expense masquerading as quality. Walter Whitman's voice carried the false warmth of a salesman. Good to see you up and running again, Richard. Walter straightened, his spine instinctively bracing. What can I do for you? Oh, nothing, just being neighborly. Whitman's eyes swept the shop, lingering on the corner of Dream's display. His lip curled slightly. Clever marketing, that, very sentimental. The way he said sentimental made it sound like a weakness. It's honest, Walter replied evenly. These are real people, real stories. Whitman picked up one of Walter's business cards from the counter, turning it over between manicured fingers. You keys. Oh no, Walter, I've been thinking about your situation. This fire, the insurance dragging their feet, it's terrible, really. A man your age trying to rebuild. I'm managing fine, are you though? Whitman set the card down with deliberate precision. Because I hear things. I hear the insurance company is asking questions. I hear customers are wondering if maybe the shop's best days are behind it. Walter's hands curled into fists beneath the counter. What's your point, Richard? No point, just concerned. Whitman's smile didn't reach his eyes. You've been at this a long time. Maybe it's time to consider retirement. Sell the building. I know a developer who'd give you a fair price. You could finally rest. Enjoy your golden years. I'm not interested in selling, not even to save yourself the embarrassment. Whitman's voice dropped, losing its false friendliness. Come on, Walter, look around. This whole corner of town is changing. People don't want their grandpa's shoe repair anymore. They want style, quality, brands. They want premium footwear, not, he gestured dismissively at the shelves. Then they can shop at your store, Walter said, his voice harder now. But plenty of people still value craftsmanship over logos. Do they? Whitman nodded toward the empty shop. Where are they then? The question landed like a blow because Walter had been asking himself the same thing. The brief surge of customers after the corner of dreams had faded. The whispers, the rumors, they were working. I think you should leave, Walter said quietly. I'm going. Whitman headed toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. One more thing, Walter. That display of yours, the medal, the stories. That boy, Jamal, is it? The runner. Something cold slithered down Walter's spine. What about him? Just seems like a lot of responsibility, that's all. Getting a kid involved in your business struggles. Letting him invest his prize money in your problems. Some people might call that inappropriate, manipulative even. Get out. The words came out low and dangerous. Whitman raised his hands in mock surrender. Just making an observation. Have a good day, Walter. The door chimed behind him. Through the window, Walter watched Whitman cross the street back to Premium Footwear, pulling out his phone as he walked. Walter's heart hammered against his ribs. His hands shook as he gripped the counter edge. In 40 years of business, he dealt with difficult customers, late payments, even a robbery attempt in the 80s. But this calculated cruelty disguised as concern. It shook him. Because Whitman had found his vulnerability and named it Jamal. The boy who'd stumbled into his shop 3 weeks ago had become something precious to Walter. A reminder that his work mattered, a connection he hadn't realized he'd been starving for since Michael died. The thought that someone might twist that relationship into something ugly made Walter's stomach turn. He was still standing there, staring at nothing, when Jamal arrived after school. Hey Mr. Blake. The boy stopped short, reading Walter's expression. What's wrong? Nothing. Just a difficult customer. Which one? Jamal's eyes narrowed. That guy I saw leaving. The one from the fancy store. It's fine, Jamal. Don't worry about it. But Jamal was already moving to the window, watching Whitman across the street. He came here to mess with you. He came to make an offer. I declined. That's all. That's not all. Jamal turned back, and there was something ancient in his young eyes, the kind of wisdom poverty teaches early. He's the one spreading the rumors, isn't he? About the fire, about you. Walter wanted to deny it, but the lie wouldn't come. I don't know that for certain, but you suspect it. Silence was answer enough. Jamal's jaw tightened. We need to fight back. Tell people the truth. The truth is I'm an old man with a burned-out workshop and declining business, Walter said more sharply than he intended. The truth is he's probably right. Maybe I should sell, maybe. No. Jamal's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare let him win by making you believe his lies about yourself. The words hung in the air between them. Walter stared at this 15-year-old, who somehow understood exactly what poison Whitman had been dripping. Mr. Blake, Jamal said softer now, when you fixed my shoes, you didn't just fix them. You fixed something in me. You showed me that someone could be kind without wanting something back. You can't let him take that away. You can't. Before Walter could respond, the door chimed again. They both turned. Richard Whitman stood in the doorway, a smirk on his face. In his hands he held a framed photograph, the one from Walter's wall, the picture of Michael at 15 in his track uniform. Almost forgot, Whitman said. This fell outside. Must have been knocked loose. But the frame wasn't damaged. The picture hung perfectly straight on its nail on the wall. Whitman had taken it down himself. He set it on the counter with exaggerated care. Handsome boy, shame about what happened to him. I heard all about it. Leukemia, right. Terrible thing. You must think about him every day. Wonder what he'd have become. Walter's vision tunneled. The shop disappeared except for Whitman's face, that self-satisfied, cruel face. Get out. Walter's voice didn't sound like his own. I'm just saying it's got to be hard. Running this place alone. All these memories. Maybe you're holding on too tight to the past. I said get out. Walter lunged around the counter. Somewhere in his mind, a voice screamed that this was exactly what Whitman wanted, that he was being played. But the rage, the sheer blinding rage at having his son's memory weaponized against him, drowned out everything else. He grabbed Whitman's expensive jacket, and Whitman stumbled backward in apparent shock. They crashed into a shoe display rack. Mr. Blake. No. Jamal was between them suddenly, his young strength surprising as he pushed Walter back. Stop, he's recording you. Walter froze. Whitman righted himself, and there it was, his phone, held at chest height. Camera clearly active. The red recording light blinked. Assault, Whitman said calmly, lowering the phone. Witnessed and recorded. I came in peace, Walter, and you attacked me. You took down my son's picture. I picked up a frame that had fallen. You can't prove otherwise. Whitman smiled. But I can prove you put your hands on me. I can prove you're unstable, dangerous, even. Jamal's hand was still pressed against Walter's chest, holding him back. The boy's eyes blazed with fury, but his voice came out controlled. Get out of this shop. Now. Whitman straightened his jacket. With pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, Walter, both of you. He left, and the silence that followed felt like the aftermath of an explosion. Walter sagged against the counter, his heart racing so hard he thought he might be having an attack. Jamal guided him to the stool behind the counter, and Walter sat, his head in his hands. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have. He played you. That's what he does. Jamal's voice was tight with anger. He wanted you to lose it on camera. And I gave him exactly what he wanted. They sat in heavy silence. Through the window Walter could see a small crowd gathered outside, premium footwear. Whitman was showing them something on his phone. Their faces ranged from shock to disapproving. This is bad, Walter said. Yeah. Jamal pulled out his own phone. Yeah, it is. But the boy's fingers were moving quickly, texting someone. When he looked up, there was a hardness in his expression that reminded Walter uncomfortably that Jamal had grown up in places where survival meant being smart, not just strong. What are you doing? Walter asked. calling in reinforcements. Within 20 minutes May Porter arrived, still in her scrubs from her shift. Coach Reynolds came too, the track coach, a bear of a man with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness that stretched across 3 decades at Lincoln High. May's first action was to check Walter's pulse and breathing. "You okay? Any chest pain?" "I'm fine." "Mortified, but fine." "Good." She straightened, and her eyes were hard as flint. "Now tell us exactly what happened." Walter recounted it: Whitman's visit, the veiled threats, the deliberate provocation with Michael's photograph. Jamal added details Walter had missed: how Whitman had positioned himself to be pushed into the display, how he'd held his phone at the perfect angle to capture Walter's charge, but not his own instigation. Coach Reynolds listened without interruption. When they finished, he nodded slowly. "Whitman's going to use that video to destroy you," he said bluntly. "He'll claim you're unstable, dangerous. He'll say you attacked him without provocation. And people will believe him because I'm the one who looks desperate," Walter finished. "The one whose shop is failing. Unless," Jamal said, and everyone turned to him. "Unless we change the narrative." "How?" May asked. "By proving he's been sabotaging Mr. Blake all along. By showing everyone who Richard Whitman really is." Coach Reynolds frowned. "You have proof of that?" Jamal hesitated, and Walter saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. "Finally, maybe, but I need time to confirm it. And I need," he looked at Coach Reynolds, "I need something big to distract everyone while I figure it out." "Like what?" "Like a challenge. Something public that Mr. Blake can win. Something that shows the whole neighborhood who the real man is here." Coach Reynolds and May exchanged glances. Something unspoken passed between them. "The Thanksgiving run," Coach said slowly. May nodded. "It's perfect." "What's the Thanksgiving run?" Walter asked. "Community fundraiser," Coach explained. "Every year local businesses sponsor runners for a 5K through downtown. Entry fee goes to the neighborhood food bank. There's always been friendly competition about which sponsor's runner places highest." He paused. "Whitman sponsored a runner the last 3 years, won twice. You want me to sponsor Jamal?" Walter's head was spinning. "No," Jamal said, his eyes lighting up. "I want you to challenge Whitman directly, your sponsored runner, against his stakes, real ones." "What kind of stakes?" "If I win," Jamal said, "Whitman has to issue a public apology, admit he's been spreading rumors about you and your shop. And if you lose," Jamal's jaw set, "Blake and Sons closes for a month, and you apologize to him, publicly." "Absolutely not," Walter said immediately. "A month closed would destroy what little business I have left. I can't, which is why I won't lose." Jamal's confidence was absolute. "Coach, would you be willing to be the official mediator? Make sure everything's fair." Coach Reynolds considered. "The community association would need to approve it. But if both parties agree, and the money still goes to the food bank," he nodded, "I can make it happen." "This is insane," Walter protested. "Even if you win, Jamal, it doesn't prove anything about the fire. It proves that your shop, your work, your legacy is worth fighting for." May interrupted. "It proves that you have people who believe in you. And while everyone's watching the race, we'll have time to dig up the real evidence we need." "What evidence?" Walter looked at Jamal. "What do you know?" "I know there's a city surveillance camera that has a view of your shop. I know it might have footage from the night of the fire." Jamal's voice was steady. "I've been trying to figure out how to access those records, but it takes time, and it takes not drawing attention while I'm asking questions. So we give everyone something else to pay attention to," Coach Reynolds said. "A race, old school versus new money. The whole neighborhood will be watching." Walter looked at the 3 faces surrounding him. The boy who'd walked into his shop with broken shoes and broken hope. The mother who'd raised that boy to believe in paying kindness forward. The coach who'd built his reputation on fairness and integrity. They were offering him a lifeline, a chance to fight back, not with anger and fists, but with faith in the goodness they'd all been trying to prove existed. "If we do this," Walter said slowly, "and Whitman agrees, he'll play dirty. Let him," Jamal replied. "We'll play smart." Through the window Walter could see Premium Footwear's gleaming facade. Whitman stood inside, visible through the glass, talking on his phone, probably spreading the story of Walter's attack right now.
poisoning more minds against the old cobbler who couldn't control his temper. Walter thought of Michael, thought of the track spikes his son never got to wear, thought of all the years he'd spent just surviving, just existing, letting the world pass him by because participating hurt too much. "All right," he said, "let's do it." Jamal's grin was fierce. "Coach, can you make the official challenge tomorrow? I'll call an emergency meeting of the community association tonight. If Whitman's really been spreading lies about Walter, this is his chance to prove he's an honest man. He won't be able to refuse without looking guilty." As they prepared to leave, Walter pulled Jamal aside. "This camera footage," he said quietly. "What do you think it'll show?" Jamal met his eyes. "I don't know yet, but I promise you, Mr. Blake, whatever the truth is, we're going to find it, and everyone's going to see it." That night, after everyone had gone, Walter stood in his shop alone. He walked to the wall and carefully straightened Michael's photograph, the one Whitman had weaponized. His son smiled out at him. "Forever 15, forever full of potential." "I'm going to fight," Walter whispered to the image. "I'm going to try. That okay with you?" The photograph didn't answer, but in the silence of the shop, surrounded by decades of work and memory, Walter thought he felt something like blessing. Tomorrow Coach Reynolds would issue the challenge. Tomorrow the whole neighborhood would learn about the race and its stakes. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. But tonight, Walter Blake allowed himself to hope. And across the street, Richard Whitman schemed. The community association meeting lasted 47 minutes. Coach Reynolds presented the proposal, a sanctioned competition between sponsored runners, proceeds benefiting the food bank, terms binding pending both parties' agreement. Richard Whitman agreed immediately. Too immediately, Walter thought, watching from the back of the room. The man smiled as he shook Coach Reynolds' hand, projecting magnanimous sportsmanship. But his eyes held calculation. "I'm happy to participate," Whitman announced to the gathered neighbors, "though I'm surprised Walter thinks this will help his situation. Running away from your problems doesn't solve them." He let the words hang, smiling to show he was joking, but the implication was clear. Walter kept his mouth shut. Jamal had coached him, "Don't engage, let him talk. Every word he says is a rope he'll hang himself with later." The terms were finalized. 3 weeks from Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, 5 kilometers through downtown Cleveland, runners would be supplied by each sponsor, Jamal for Blake and Sons, and Marcus Webb, a college sophomore Whitman had been sponsoring, for premium footwear. Stakes documented, signed and witnessed. Loser issues a public apology at the finish line, admitted before the entire gathered community to whatever wrongdoing the winner specifies. Additionally, if Whitman's runner won, Blake and Sons would close for 1 month, and Walter would publicly apologize for the assault in his shop. If Jamal won, Whitman would admit to spreading false rumors, and would cease all harassment. It was Coach Reynolds' addition, that word harassment, that made Whitman's smile falter momentarily, but he signed. Walking home that night, Walter felt the weight of what he'd agreed to. "You're quiet," May observed. She'd insisted on walking him home, citing the late hour and his stress levels. "I'm terrified," Walter admitted. "If Jamal loses, he won't. You can't know that. This Marcus Webb, Whitman's runner, I looked him up. He was a state champion in high school, got a partial scholarship to Youngstown State. He's older, more experienced, and Whitman's probably been training him for weeks already. And Jamal's got something Marcus doesn't," May said firmly. "What's that?" "A reason bigger than ego." The next morning, training began in earnest. Coach Reynolds opened the track to Jamal every morning before school, and every evening after. Walter showed up to the first session uncertain what role he could play. He knew leather and stitches, not athletic performance. "You're here for his feet," Coach told him. "You're going to make sure his shoes are perfect. That kid's going to run the race of his life, and you're going to make sure nothing mechanical holds him back." So Walter watched, learned and worked. He measured Jamal's feet properly, not just length and width, but arch height, pressure points, the exact angle of his stride. He studied the wear patterns on Jamal's training shoes and created custom insoles to correct a slight overpronation Walter detected. You're going to burn yourself out before the race, Walter warned after watching Jamal push through a particularly brutal interval workout. Can't afford to hold back in training, Jamal gasped, bent over with hands on knees. Yes you can. Smart training isn't about maximum effort every day, it's about building strength progressively. Walter surprised himself with the advice. Michael's old coach had told him something similar years ago. Coach Reynolds nodded approvingly. Listen to him, Jamal. Walter's right. They developed a rhythm. Jamal trained 6 days a week, with Walter adjusting his shoes after each session, noting hot spots, replacing laces when they showed wear, monitoring the sole compression. May brought proper meals, protein and complex carbs, carefully measured portions. He needs fuel, she explained to Walter, unpacking containers of grilled chicken and sweet potatoes. Can't run on hope alone. How are you paying for this? Walter asked quietly. The extra food, it's not cheap. I picked up extra shifts. May's tone brooked no argument. My boy's fighting for something that matters. I'm going to make sure he has what he needs. Walter tried to contribute money from the shop's dwindling reserves, but May refused. You're giving him your knowledge, that's payment enough. In the evenings after training, Jamal would stop by the shop, sometimes to help with customer repairs. Business had picked up slightly, though nowhere near pre-fire levels, sometimes just to sit and talk while Walter worked. It was during one of these evenings, 2 weeks before the race, that Jamal pulled out his phone. I need to show you something, he said, but you have to promise to stay calm. Walter's hand stilled on the shoe he was stitching. Show me. Jamal pulled up a saved video file, grainy security footage, black and white, time-stamped, 2:47 a.m. on the night of the fire. The angle showed the side of Blake & Sons building. For long seconds, nothing moved. Then a figure emerged from the alley behind the shop. Male medium build, wearing a hooded sweatshirt. He carried something, a bag or container. The figure moved to the back door of the shop, kneeling there for several minutes. Then he stood, walked quickly back down the alley and disappeared. 4 minutes later, in the timestamp, a faint glow appeared in the shop's back window. Walter's blood ran cold. Someone set the fire. Yeah, Jamal's voice was tight. Can you see his face? No. He kept the hood up, knew where the camera was. Jamal paused, but watch what happens next. He fast-forwarded. At 3:15 a.m., another figure appeared, this one walking normally down the main street. As the figure passed under a streetlight, it became clear, Richard Whitman. He stopped across from Blake & Sons, pulling out his phone. He stood there for 2 minutes, clearly filming or photographing the building. Then he made a phone call. The video showed him talking animatedly for several minutes, before walking out of frame. He called 911 at 3:18 a.m. Jamal said, I checked the fire department logs. It's public record. Anonymous tip about smoke coming from a shop on Maple Street. He called in his own arson. Walter's voice was hollow. He wanted to be sure the fire department got there in time to stop it from spreading to his building, but late enough that your shop would be destroyed. Jamal's jaw was tight. He's not trying to kill you, Mr. Blake. He's trying to ruin you slowly, make you suffer. How did you get this footage? Jamal shifted uncomfortably. I filed a public records request. Took 3 weeks, cost me $60 in processing fees, money from helping Coach Reynolds referee youth games. The city fought it at first, said there was no active investigation so no reason to release it. But I kept pushing, said I was doing a school project on neighborhood safety. A school project. I lied. Jamal met his eyes. I lied, and I'd do it again. Because this is proof, Mr. Blake, this is everything. Walter stared at the frozen image on the phone. Whitman, captured in the streetlight's glow, calling in the fire he'd arranged. Why haven't you shown this to the police? Because I wanted you to see it first, decide what we do with it. Jamal took a breath. And because I wanted insurance. Insurance. If we go to the police now, Whitman gets arrested. But there's bail lawyers, delays. He could drag it out for months. And in the meantime, the neighborhood just sees 2 businesses fighting, and people take sides, and everything gets messy. Jamal leaned forward. But if I win the race, when I win the race, we show this footage to everyone at the same time. Whitman confesses to the rumors as part of the bet terms, and then we prove he's not just a gossip, he's a criminal. That's why you insisted on the stakes, including his public confession. Right, because a confession before witnesses recorded, about specific acts, that's evidence. That strengthens the criminal case. Jamal's eyes were hard. Coach Reynolds has a lawyer friend ready to take this to the DA the moment we have Whitman's confession on record. The video plus his own words, he's done. Walter sat back, mind reeling. This 15-year-old had been thinking 3 steps ahead, building a case, protecting Walter's interests while everyone thought they were just preparing for a race. You're terrifying, Walter said, but there was admiration in it.
I'm careful, Jamal corrected. I've seen too many people get screwed by the system because they didn't think strategically. We're not just going to beat Whitman, we're going to make sure he can't come back from this. And if you don't win the race, Jamal's face set in hard lines. I'll win. But Walter heard the fear beneath the certainty. Because Jamal was carrying more than himself now, he was carrying Walter's livelihood, his reputation, the hope that justice existed. I need to make you the best shoes you've ever worn, Walter said quietly. Over the next week, Walter poured everything he knew into Jamal's racing shoes. He special-ordered lightweight spikes from a supplier in Oregon. He customized the insole with NASA-grade cushioning material, shaped precisely to Jamal's foot map. He reinforced the heel counter to prevent any slippage during the final sprint. Every night he worked until his eyes blurred. Every morning he rose at 5 a.m. to be at the track when Jamal arrived. He taught Jamal techniques he'd learned from Michael's coaches, how to breathe in rhythm with his stride, how to conserve energy in the early kilometers, how to recognize the exact moment to unleash his finishing kick. Your opponent will be strong, Walter said during one evening session. He'll probably try to dominate early, burn you out psychologically. Don't bite, run your race, trust your training. What if he's just better? Jamal asked, the fear finally surfacing. Then we'll deal with it. But I don't think he is. Walter tapped Jamal's chest. You've got something he doesn't. You're not running for pride or sponsorship money, you're running for truth. That'll carry you further than talent alone. 3 days before the race, Walter finished the shoes. They were beautiful, sleek, lightweight, the blue and silver colors Jamal had chosen. Walter's finest work. He presented them to Jamal at the track before evening practice. Jamal took them with reverent hands, turning them over, examining every stitch. These are perfect, he whispered. These are ready, Walter corrected. Now you need to be ready too. That night, Jamal took the shoes home and set them beside his bed. The old sneakers, the original pair Walter had repaired, sat on his shelf now, retired but honored. In his own home Walter lay awake, staring at his ceiling. In 2 days everything would be decided. His shop, his reputation, Jamal's future, justice for the fire, all of it balanced on one race. The weight should have crushed him. Instead, Walter felt something unexpected. Peace, because win or lose, he'd tried. He'd fought back. He'd let people in again, let himself care again. After 5 years of sleepwalking through life, he was finally awake. And across town, Jamal lay awake too, his new shoes beside him, the weight of what was coming pressing down. But unlike Walter, Jamal didn't feel peace, he felt fire. The kind of fire that would carry him across 5 kilometers of Cleveland pavement. The kind that would burn away lies and reveal truth. Friday morning, race day, dawned cold and clear. It was time. The starting line was set up in Public Square, Cleveland's downtown heart. By 8 a.m., despite the post-Thanksgiving hour, hundreds of people lined the streets. The Thanksgiving run had been a modest tradition for years, but this year, with the added drama of the Blake Whitman Challenge, it had become an event. Local news had picked up the story. Old school versus new money. Shoe repair shop owner challenges, boutique in sponsored race. The human interest angle was irresistible. The aging craftsman fighting for his legacy. The young runner trying to prove kindness wasn't dead. The slick businessman who'd allegedly spread vicious rumors. Walter stood behind the snow fence separating spectators from runners, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd barely slept. Every worst-case scenario had played through his mind at 3 a.m. Jamal injured, Whitman somehow cheating, the evidence they had being thrown out on technicalities. May stood beside him, her hand on his arm, grounding, steadying. He's going to be fine, she said for the 100th time. I know, then breathe like you believe it. Near the starting line, Jamal bounced on his toes, shaking out his legs. The custom shoes gleamed in the morning sun. He wore simple running gear, Blake & Son's name printed across his chest on a shirt May had made at the mall kiosk. Spending money she didn't have. 30 feet away, Marcus Webb stretched with professional efficiency. 20 years old, lean and muscular, every movement radiating confidence. His premium footwear uniform was clearly expensive, moisture-wicking fabric, aerodynamic cut. Richard Whitman stood behind him, like a cornerman before a boxing match, speaking rapidly into Marcus's ear. Coach Reynolds, officiating in his capacity as Community Association Athletics Director, approached the starting line with a megaphone. "Runners, take your positions." 63 participants shuffled to the start, mostly local joggers running for the food bank, plus a handful of serious runners. But all eyes were on Jamal and Marcus. Walter watched Jamal's face as he settled into position. The boy's expression was focused, inward. He'd taught him that, how to build a mental wall around himself before a race, how to shut out everything except the task ahead. "You know," a voice said beside Walter, making him jump. Richard Whitman had materialized at his elbow, smile in place, eyes cold. "It's not too late to forfeit," Whitman continued conversationally. "Save the kid the embarrassment. Marcus ran a 15:45 5K last month. Your boy's best is, what? 17:30. He's outmatched, Walter. We'll see, will we?" Whitman's voice dropped. "Or will we just see a foolish old man who dragged a kid into his mess? Either way, this time tomorrow, your shop is mine. The building owner's already agreed to sell to my developer friend. You'll be evicted within 60 days. Walter's stomach dropped. "That's not part of our agreement. The race agreement, no, but business is business." Whitman's smile widened. "I'm going to turn your shop into a coffee bar. Premium footwear customers will love having an espresso spot next door. Maybe I'll keep one of your old photos on the wall. Nostalgia sells." Walter's vision tunneled. This wasn't just about reputation or rumors. Whitman was going to erase him completely. "Runners ready," Coach Reynolds' voice boomed. Walter forced himself to focus on Jamal. The boy glanced back once, found Walter's face in the crowd. Their eyes met. "Trust the shoes," Walter mouthed. "Run your race." Jamal nodded once and turned forward. Set, the starting pistol cracked. 63 runners surged forward, and the crowd roared. Marcus Webb took the lead immediately, his long stride eating up pavement. The strategy was obvious: go out fast, establish dominance, force Jamal to burn energy trying to keep up. But Jamal didn't take the bait. He settled into the middle of the lead pack, 8th or 9th position, his breathing controlled. Walter could see the discipline in every stride, the rhythm they'd worked on, the measured effort. "He's falling behind." Someone in the crowd shouted. "No," Coach Reynolds said quietly, beside Walter. "He's being smart." The course wound through downtown, up Euclid Avenue, past the theaters and restaurants beginning to wake for the day, then east toward University Circle. Spectators lined the route, cheering, but Walter barely heard them. His entire world had narrowed to Jamal's blue and silver form. At the 1-mile mark, Marcus still led by 20 meters. He looked strong, fluid. Jamal remained in the chase pack, conserving energy. At mile 2, Marcus's lead had extended to 30 meters. Whitman was following in a golf cart with other sponsors, shouting encouragement that sounded more like commands. "Come on, Jamal," May whispered beside Walter. "Come on, baby." Walter's fingernails dug into his palms. Had he been wrong? Was Jamal truly outmatched? Then at the 2.5-mile marker, something changed. Jamal moved. It wasn't dramatic, just a slight increase in pace, a shift in his running posture, but Walter recognized it, the move from conserve to chase. Jamal broke away from the pack, pursuing Marcus with mechanical precision. The gap began to close. 30 meters, 25, 20. Marcus glanced back, saw Jamal coming, and his form changed, tightened. He was feeling the pressure of his early pace now, feeling the burn of going out too fast. "That's it," Coach Reynolds murmured. "He's cracking." At 3 miles, Jamal had closed to 15 meters. His face was set in grim determination, but his stride remained fluid. The shoes Walter had built were doing their job. No slippage, no hot spots, just perfect connection between foot and ground. Marcus looked back again. The glance cost him, his rhythm faltered.
just for a second, but Jamal saw it, and pushed harder. 10 meters, the course turned south, heading back toward Public Square. Half a mile to go, the crowd noise swelled as they approached the finish area. 8 meters. Marcus tried to respond, digging deep, but his form was deteriorating. His shoulders hunched, his breathing ragged. He'd burned his matches too early. 5 meters. Walter was running alongside now, following the course on the sidewalk with May and half the crowd. His lungs screamed, his old legs protested, but he couldn't stop. He had to see this. 3 meters. 400 meters from the finish, Jamal pulled even with Marcus. For 10 strides, they ran side by side. Walter could see both their faces, Marcus's contorted with pain and desperation, Jamal's focused and fierce. Then Jamal surged. It wasn't a gentle acceleration, it was an explosion. Every ounce of carefully conserved energy, every hour of training, every reason he was running, all of it poured into his legs. Marcus tried to match him, couldn't. Fell back. Jamal didn't look back again. He ran straight and true, his eyes fixed on the finish line. 200 meters ahead. 150 meters. The crowd was screaming. 100 meters. Jamal's lead had extended to 5 meters, then 8. 50 meters. Marcus was fading badly now, his stride broken. 2 other runners were passing him. 20 meters. Jamal crossed the finish line with his arms raised, his face a mask of triumph and relief and disbelief all at once. His time, 16:22. Marcus finished 14 seconds later, bent over immediately, gasping. 2 more runners came in before the rest of the pack. Walter reached the finish area just as May pushed through the crowd to embrace her son. Jamal was crying, great heaving sobs of release, and May held him, both of them shaking. Walter stood back, his own eyes burning. He'd seen his son run once years ago, before the diagnosis. Michael had won that day too, and Walter had felt this same fierce pride, this same overwhelming joy. Now impossibly, he felt it again. Jamal looked up from his mother's embrace, and found Walter in the crowd. The boy's face broke into a wide, exhausted grin. "We did it," he mouthed. Walter nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Coach Reynolds was on the loudspeaker, announcing official results, but Walter barely heard it. He was watching Richard Whitman's face across the finish area. Whitman stood frozen, his expression cycling through shock, anger and something that looked like fear. His carefully constructed plans were crumbling, and he knew it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Coach Reynolds' voice boomed, "in accordance with the terms agreed upon by both parties, witnessed and signed, we will now conduct the post-race acknowledgement. Mr. Whitman, please approach the platform." Whitman didn't move for a long moment. His lawyer Walter recognized him from the community association meeting, leaned in, speaking urgently in his ear. Whitman shook his head, jaw set. "Mr. Whitman," Coach Reynolds repeated, "the terms are binding." Slowly, as if walking to his execution, Whitman mounted the small awards platform. Jamal stood there already, still breathing hard, his medal around his neck. Someone handed Whitman a microphone. The crowd had gone quiet, sensing the drama. "I acknowledge," Whitman began, his voice tight, "that Jamal Porter won today's race fairly, and according to our agreement, I must state that," he paused, clearly warring with himself, "that you spread false rumors about Blake and Sons," Coach Reynolds prompted, reading from the signed agreement, "that you engaged in harassment and unfair business practices." Whitman's face flushed red. "I may have, in the heat of competition, made certain comments about Walter Blake's business practices that were not substantiated." "That's not what the paper says," Coach Reynolds said firmly. "Read the specific language, Mr. Whitman." A long excruciating pause. "Then I deliberately spread false rumors that Walter Blake's fire was insurance fraud. I made unfounded accusations about his business practices. I engaged in a sustained campaign of harassment, designed to drive Blake and Sons out of business." The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. Several people shouted questions. Whitman tried to step down, but Coach Reynolds held up a hand. "We're not finished," he said. He gestured, and 2 people pushed forward through the crowd, a woman Walter recognized as Coach's lawyer friend, and a uniformed Cleveland police officer. Jamal pulled out his phone. His hands shook as he pulled up the saved video file and handed it to the lawyer. "There's more," Jamal said into a microphone someone had given him. His voice cracked but held steady. Mr. Whitman didn't just spread rumors, he caused the fire he was lying about. The crowd noise rose to a roar. Whitman's face went white. "That's slander," he shouted. "You can't prove." "I can actually." Jamal's voice was stronger now. He gestured to the lawyer, who had connected his phone to a portable speaker system Coach Reynolds had ready. "This is footage from a city surveillance camera, acquired through legal public records request. Time-stamped November 14th, 2:47 a.m., the night of the fire at Blake & Sons. The video played on a laptop screen that had been positioned for the crowd to see. Grainy black and white, but unmistakable, the hooded figure approaching the shop, kneeling by the back door, the subsequent glow in the window. Then the second clip, Whitman himself, filming the fire, making the phone call. The crowd was silent now, everyone straining to see the screen. Metadata from the fire department confirms Mr. Whitman called in an anonymous tip at 3:18 a.m., the lawyer said, her voice carrying clearly. He reported a fire at Blake & Sons, a fire that had been set only 31 minutes earlier, a fire he had arranged. "This is ridiculous," Whitman sputtered. "That could be anyone in that hoodie. You can't see a face, but we can see you," Jamal interrupted. "We can see you watching it burn, see you calling it in. Why would you be there at 3 a.m., Mr. Whitman? How did you know about the fire if you didn't set it?" The police officer stepped forward. "Mr. Whitman, I'm going to need you to come with me." "On what charge?" "You can't arrest me based on some grainy video." "Arson," the officer said calmly. "An insurance fraud. You filed a claim with your own insurance company for smoke damage to premium footwear from the Blake fire, plus criminal harassment, interfering with a business, making false statements to authorities." He pulled out handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." What happened next would be replayed on Cleveland news channels for days. Richard Whitman, successful businessman and pillar of the community, being handcuffed in front of hundreds of witnesses while trying to maintain his dignity and failing. His lawyer was already on his phone, no doubt arranging bail, but the damage was done. The video would be evidence. His own recorded confession about the rumors made just minutes ago would support the prosecution's case about motive. Whitman had destroyed himself with his own arrogance, his certainty that he couldn't be touched. As the police car drove away, the crowd began to disperse, people talking excitedly, phones out, already spreading the story across social media. Walter stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what had just happened. Justice. Real justice. Not someday, not maybe, now. Here, in front of everyone. Jamal approached him, May right behind. The boy looked exhausted, wrung out, but his eyes were bright. "Your shop is safe, Mr. Blake," he said quietly. "Your reputation is safe, and Whitman's going to pay for what he did." Walter reached out and pulled Jamal into a hug, not trusting his voice. The boy was sweaty and trembling with exhaustion, but he hugged back fiercely. "Thank you," Walter finally managed. "Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it, but thank you. You fixed my shoes," Jamal said, pulling back. "I fixed your life. We're even." "We're not even close to even," Walter said, "but we can call it a start." May was crying again, smiling through her tears. Coach Reynolds approached, hand extended. "Hell of a race, Jamal," he said. "Hell of a strategy, all of you." "You knew," Walter realized. "About the video, about the plan. Jamal told me 3 days ago, asked me to have the lawyer and officer on standby." Coach Reynolds grinned. "Kid's got a future in law if the running doesn't work out." A reporter from Channel 5 was pushing through the crowd, camera operator in tow. Mr. Blake, can we get a statement?" Walter blinked into the camera lights, completely unprepared. "I just want to say that justice isn't always fast, but it's real, and I want to thank Jamal Porter and his mother May for believing in it, for believing in me. Jamal, you just won a race and helped expose a criminal. How do you feel?" Jamal looked at the camera, at his mother, at Walter. His face broke into an exhausted grin. "Honestly, I really want to sit down." The crowd laughed, the tension breaking. As the reporter moved away to interview others, Jamal did indeed sit, right there on the pavement, his custom shoes still on his feet. Walter sat beside him. Then May, then Coach Reynolds. 4 people sitting on cold Cleveland pavement in late November, grinning like fools while the world spun on around them. "What happens now?" Jamal asked after a while. "Now." Walter looked at his shop, visible in the distance. "Now we rebuild. Properly this time.
No more shadows, no more lies, just good work. And the insurance company, they'll have to pay out once they see the evidence. It wasn't electrical failure, it was arson. That's their problem now, not mine. They sat in comfortable silence as the last of the crowd dispersed. The sun was higher now, warming the day despite the season. I'm going to need new shoes soon, Jamal said eventually. These are pretty much done after that race. Walter looked down at the custom shoes, scuffed, the soles showing wear from 5 kilometers of hard running. But they'd done their job. They'd carried Jamal to victory. I'll make you a new pair, Walter said. The best ones yet. Mr. Blake. Yeah, thank you for believing I could win, for believing I was worth helping that first day. Walter's throat tightened again. Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to fight for something. As they finally stood and headed their separate ways, Jamal and May back to their apartment, Walter back to his shop. The afternoon was settling into evening. Tomorrow there would be insurance calls and police statements. Tomorrow the news coverage would intensify. Tomorrow customers who'd stayed away would return, eager to be part of the story of the cobbler who survived. But today Walter Blake walked back to his shop with his head high, his heart full, and his faith in humanity restored. The corner of dreams glowed in its window as he unlocked the door. Jamal's first medal still sat in the center, but soon there'd be a second one, the one from today, the one that meant everything. Walter flipped the open sign to face outward and got to work. There were shoes to repair, there always were, but now finally there was also hope. The medal ceremony happened 3 days later on a Monday evening in the public square pavilion. The community association had organized it as part of their regular monthly meeting, but the crowd was 3 times the usual size, easily 200 people packed into a space meant for 70. The story had grown in the telling. Local news had run it repeatedly. Arson exposed at Thanksgiving run. The Cleveland Plain Dealer had done a full feature on Walter, complete with photos of the corner of dreams and interviews with customers whose shoes he'd saved over the years. The National Wire Services had picked it up. The David versus Goliath angle was too good to resist. Richard Whitman had been arraigned on Friday, bail set at $50,000, which he'd made immediately. His lawyer was already trying to suppress the video evidence on technical grounds, but the DA's office seemed confident. The case was solid. Premium Footwear had closed. A temporarily suspended operations sign hung in the window, but everyone knew temporary meant permanent. Whitman's reputation was destroyed. His business was done. Walter stood at the edge of the pavilion, uncomfortable with the attention. He'd worn his best shirt, the one he saved for funerals and Christmas, and May had insisted on straightening his collar before they left his shop. You look very distinguished, she'd said. I look old, he'd replied. Distinguished and old aren't mutually exclusive. Now standing in the crowd, Walter watched as Coach Reynolds took the microphone at the front of the pavilion. Good evening everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. We're here for several reasons: to present official medals to the top finishers in last Friday's Thanksgiving run, to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the event, and to celebrate what this community can accomplish when we stand together for truth and justice. Applause rippled through the crowd. Coach Reynolds called forward the various age group winners, presenting medals and certificates. Each recipient got polite applause. Then he paused, consulting his notes. Now I want to recognize someone special. Jamal Porter, could you come up here? Jamal made his way forward, May beaming behind him. He wore his school clothes, khakis, and a button-up shirt that was slightly too small in the arms. He'd shot up another inch in the past month. Jamal ran the race of his life last Friday, Coach Reynolds said. 16 minutes 22 seconds for 5 kilometers. But more importantly, he ran it for the right reasons. Not for glory, not for personal gain, but to defend someone who had shown him kindness. To fight for truth when it would have been easier to look away. He placed a medal around Jamal's neck, a special one, Walter noticed, larger than the standard race medals. This is the Community Service Award, given annually to someone who embodies the best of what our neighborhood stands for. Jamal, at 15 years old, you showed courage and integrity that many adults never manage. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. Jamal ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. And now, Coach Reynolds continued as the applause died down. I want to invite Jamal to say a few words. Jamal looked panicked for a moment. He and Walter had discussed this possibility, but facing the actual microphone, facing 200 expectant faces, was different from imagining it. He stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it down to his height, and cleared his throat. Hi. His voice cracked slightly. Someone in the crowd chuckled warmly. I'm not great at speeches, so I'll keep this short. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Walter could see him centering himself the way he did before races, building that internal wall, focusing on what mattered. 3 months ago, I walked into Blake & Son shoe repair with a pair of broken sneakers and no money. I was desperate. I had a race coming up, and I knew if I could just run in decent shoes, I could win. Maybe earn some prize money. Maybe start building toward a scholarship and a future. His voice steadied as he continued. Mr. Blake could have said no. He should have said no. I was a stranger asking for free work, but he didn't. He fixed my shoes. He taught me how to care for them. He asked for nothing in return, except that I run my race. Jamal's eyes found Walter in the crowd. That kindness changed everything for me. Not just because I won that first race, but because it showed me that good people still exist. That generosity doesn't always have strings attached. That sometimes people help you because they remember when someone helped them. He took a breath. When I found out Mr. Blake's shop had been set on fire, when I saw how people turned against him based on lies and rumors, I knew I had to do something. Not to pay him back, you can't pay back real kindness, but to honor it. To make sure that kind of goodness didn't get crushed by someone cruel and greedy. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. So yes, I trained hard for that race. Yes, I ran as fast as I could. But I wasn't running for pride or medals, or even to save Mr. Blake's shop. Jamal's voice grew stronger. I was running to prove that kindness matters, that when someone does good in the world, it creates ripples, and sometimes those ripples come back around to protect them when they need it most. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. I need to tell you all something else, something important. Walter felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't in the script they'd discussed. That video of Mr. Whitman, the one showing he arranged the fire, I almost didn't go looking for it. Part of me thought, why bother? The man's already spreading rumors, already winning, why risk stirring up more trouble? Jamal held up the USB drive. But my mom taught me something. She taught me that truth matters, even when it's hard, even when it's risky, even when it might be easier to just accept injustice and move on. His voice dropped. Especially then. He gestured toward Walter. Mr. Blake spent 40 years in that shop, helping people, fixing what was broken, making things last when everyone else said to throw them away and buy new. He's not rich, he's not famous, he's just a good man who does good work. Jamal's eyes swept the crowd, and someone tried to destroy him for it. Not with competition, that would be fair, but with fire and lies and manipulation. And he almost got away with it. Would have gotten away with it, if we'd all just accepted the rumors and moved on. He held up the USB drive higher. This drive has the full camera footage. Not just what the police needed for the arrest, but hours of footage from that whole week. It shows Whitman and his employee having conversations outside Premium Footwear. It shows them pointing at Blake & Sons making plans. It shows the employee, the one in the hoodie who actually set the fire, going in and out of Whitman's store 6 times that week. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was new information. I gave copies to the police, obviously, but I wanted you all to know, wanted you to see how carefully this was planned, how deliberate it was, because Mr. Whitman is out on bail right now. His lawyer's probably going to argue this was all a misunderstanding, that the video can be interpreted different ways. Jamal's jaw set hard. But you can't misinterpret this. He tapped the USB drive. This is conspiracy. This is attempted destruction of a man's livelihood. And this, he touched his metal. This is what happens when a community decides truth matters more than convenience. He looked directly into the crowd, his young face fierce. So when Mr. Whitman's trial comes up, when there are calls to go easy on him because he's a businessman, because he's connected, because boys will be boys or whatever excuse people make, I want you all to remember this moment. Remember that you stood here tonight. Remember that you decided goodness deserves protection. He handed the USB drive to Coach Reynolds, then stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. People stood,
May was crying openly. Coach Reynolds looked stunned. Walter felt his own eyes burning. This kid, this beautiful, fierce, righteous kid, had just made it impossible for anyone in Cleveland to look away from Whitman's crime. As the applause continued, Jamal made his way back through the crowd to stand beside Walter. "You didn't tell me you were going to do that," Walter said quietly. "Didn't want you to talk me out of it." "Why would I talk you out of it?" "Because you're too kind. You'd worry about making me a target, about Whitman's lawyer coming after me." Jamal shrugged. "But I'm already a target. Might as well make sure everyone knows why." Before Walter could respond, Coach Reynolds was back at the microphone. I think we all just witnessed something powerful. Jamal's right. Truth matters. Justice matters. And this community stands for both." He paused. "Walter Blake, can you come up here?" Walter's stomach dropped. "Oh no. Go," May said, giving him a gentle push. Reluctantly, Walter made his way forward. The crowd parted for him, and he could feel their eyes, sympathetic, curious, supportive. At the front, Coach Reynolds handed him the microphone. Walter stared at it like it was a snake. "I'm not much for speeches," he started, and several people chuckled. "I'm a cobbler. I work with my hands, not my words, but I want to say," he paused, collecting his thoughts. "I want to say that what Jamal did, what his mother raised him to be, that's the kind of person Michael would have been." His voice caught on his son's name. He hadn't said it out loud in front of strangers in years. "My son Michael died when he was 15. Leukemia. He never got to run his races, never got to become the man I knew he'd be. And for a long time after that, I stopped caring about much of anything. I fixed shoes because it was what I knew how to do, but I wasn't living. I was just existing." He looked at Jamal. "Then this kid walked into my shop with broken sneakers and a dream, and for some reason, maybe because he reminded me of Michael, maybe because I was just tired of being numb, I said yes. I fixed those shoes, and in doing that I fixed something in myself." Walter's throat was tight, but he pushed forward. "Jamal says he can't pay back kindness, only honor it. But he's wrong. He did pay it back. Not with money, not even with saving my shop. He paid it back by reminding me why my work matters, why showing up matters, why caring about people matters." He gestured around at the crowd. "And all of you, everyone who came to my shop after seeing The Corner of Dreams, everyone who stood by me during the investigation, everyone who's here tonight, you're part of that too. You're proof that neighborhoods can still be communities, that people can still choose what's right over what's easy." He handed the microphone back to Coach Reynolds before he could embarrass himself further. But as he stepped back, the applause was deafening. May grabbed his hand and squeezed it tight. Jamal bumped his shoulder in silent support. Coach Reynolds let the applause continue for a moment, before raising his hands for quiet. "One more thing before we end tonight. The Community Association Board has been discussing how to support Blake and Sons through this transition period. We know the insurance payout is coming, but it takes time. We know business has been disrupted, so we've established a fund, voluntary contributions from local businesses and residents to help with immediate expenses." He picked up an envelope from the table beside him. "Walter, this won't solve everything, but it's a start. $7,400, raised in the last 3 days from people who believe in what you do." Walter couldn't speak. He took the envelope with shaking hands. $7,000, from neighbors, from strangers, from people who decided his shop was worth saving. "Thank you," he managed. "All of you, thank you." As the formal ceremony ended and people began to mingle, Walter found himself surrounded. Customers he hadn't seen in years, neighbors who'd never brought him business but wanted to now, strangers who'd seen the news and been moved by the story. An elderly woman pressed a business card into his hand. "My grandson's starting a podcast about local businesses. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" "Maybe. I don't know what I'd talk about." "Your 40 years of work, your craft, your son." She smiled gently. "Stories matter, Mr. Blake. Yours is worth telling." A younger man, college-aged, approached nervously. "Mr. Blake, I'm a journalism student at Cleveland State. I'm doing my senior thesis on gentrification and small business survival. Would you let me interview you, maybe feature your shop?" "I suppose so, yes." More people, more requests, more support than Walter had ever imagined possible. Through it all, Jamal stayed close, running interference when someone got too pushy, giving Walter space when he needed it. Finally, as the crowd thinned and evening settled into night, the core group remained: Walter, May, Jamal, Coach Reynolds, and a handful of close neighbors. "Quite a day," Coach Reynolds said. "Quite a month," May corrected. "Quite a life," Walter added quietly. They stood together in comfortable silence as the pavilion lights began to dim. "Mr. Blake," Jamal asked, "what's next? For the shop, I mean." Walter thought about it. The insurance money would cover repairs and new equipment. The community fund would handle immediate expenses. Business would come back, was already coming back, if tonight's conversations were any indication. But what did he want? "I want to expand the Corner of Dreams," he said slowly. "Make it bigger. Invite more stories. Maybe start a program where I teach the craft to young people who want to learn. Pass it on before it's too late. I know someone who might be interested in learning," May said, nodding at Jamal. Jamal's eyes lit up. "Really? You'd teach me? If you want to learn, I'll teach you everything I know." Walter smiled. Every craft needs someone to carry it forward. Might as well be someone who understands what it means to save things that others have given up on. As they prepared to leave, Walter took one last look at the pavilion, at the place where truth had been spoken, where justice had been demanded, where community had proven it still meant something. Tomorrow Richard Whitman would still be out on bail, plotting his defense. Tomorrow the legal system would grind its slow course toward trial. Tomorrow there would still be work to do, repairs to make, a business to rebuild. But tonight Walter Blake went home knowing he wasn't alone, knowing his work mattered, knowing that kindness, real, genuine, selfless kindness, could still change the world, one pair of shoes at a time.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.